Good afternoon. Does this thing work? It works? Okay, great. My name is Doorenbal, and I was introduced to DDD like 4 or 5 years ago. And I hear in the DDD community, I sometimes get some negative sentiments about frameworks. And so I thought spontaneously this morning, maybe this is a chance for me to present something positive about a framework. So here's my story. I became a developer at 50 years of age. Before that, I was a IT manager in healthcare. And here's my experience. Every time I needed a new requirement or new software, I had lots of meetings, lots of talks, lots of paper, lots of proposals. Then I had to wait a very long time. And then if I was lucky, 6 months after I needed the requirement, I would get some attempt which implemented my requirements half a year after I needed them. And I don't know if you recognize this, but this was a kind of frustrating for me as a manager. And I was thinking like, can this be improved? And I had a friend who said, yes, I think it can. We are actually doing it. So he introduced me to an open source framework, which I shall mention at the end, if you want, if I'm allowed to. And so here's my story. I decided to stop being a manager and see what I can do with my project management. And he invited me on board, and he said, well, take a look at this framework. And I took a look at the framework, and it was my first encounter, a serious encounter with Java. I had heard about Maven through some other developers, but the only real hands-on experience I had with programming was PHP, which is not a real language, of course. So, let me see, I had this slide. Now this was the business of my wife. She is making these leotards and selling them through the internet. It was kind of a fun thing I did, I set up, and it turned into a small business. And and I knew her process very well, because I could hear her picking up the phone, taking in the orders, asking the questions, negotiating the payment, and I knew the process about delivering. So what I did, using the framework, I wrote this program. Let me see where it is. Da, 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 da. So this program has her entire workflow. It's in Dutch. But you can see there's orders that are open. It is orders that are finished. There's some drafts. She can go into some order. She can make some changes. Here's the orders. She can send out, well, lots of stuff. It's like ERP. So, but what is this? Well, the framework is based on naked objects. And what naked objects was, by the time I read about it, it's just Java objects made visible. So that's exactly what this framework did. It allows me to focus and model an object, and then persistence and the interface is generated for me. So I thought that's really cool, because I like processes, I like feedback loop, I like to deliver software. And here, with my Java experience, I could model this and make it actually work. And it's running, I mean, this is live. So I'm on her system. And I could even make it communicate with her email. So it is like getting her email. Also, it's stuff on her website that I can change from here. I can have some MailChimp lists that I can sync. And it was all written by a very mediocre programmer, which is me. But I knew what I wanted. I knew the processes. And so now this is the real stuff that I work on is for a company that is in real estate. And that's a very organic company, investment company, but they decided to onboard their lease management on national level. So the French office is managing their leases of all the properties in France. The Italian office is managing the leases for all the properties in Italy. In Sweden, the same thing. And so I was invited in this business in a kind of organic way. That's how they work. Johan, will you be here next week? I said, sure, if you like to. And you're staying a little longer, aren't you? And the interesting thing is that they were solving or were working on a certain corner of the business. They call it service charges. If you have a tenant like Apple or whatever, you rent out space to them, but also they are using your electricity, your water supplies, some other stuff, and they want to recharge this to the tenants. And if you think lease management is easy or property management, forget it. It's very, very complex domain. That's what I discovered. So all these rules, you know, like one tenant said, yeah, but I left on the 31st, so you can't charge me for the next month. And stuff like that, many, many business rules. Now, what surprised me is that a total ERP solution, and I was about to cheat a little bit, but these are fixtures. I wanted to show you some real data, but I'm not allowed to. But this ERP system can drill into rent, drill into rent periods. Well, there's no invoice items here, but everything that is related, I can see the index in which the rent is calculated. This whole system, which is a very complex and other centers, center management, unit management, blah, blah, blah. Lots of stuff. This whole system was built and is being maintained by 3 people. And I thought that was really cool. And what is even better is that I can travel to Italy. I have time to sit beside the user who is actually doing the lease management, and I can say, hey, explain me a little bit more. When you have these tax receipts thing, and you want tax to return, you are going through all these bank statements. Are you doing that every time? Can I help you? So I have lots of time to spend with the business users. Because the coding and delivering value, for me, sometimes I can make the changes the hour after I talk to them. I return, spin it up locally with some fixer, says, is this what you mean? Rapid feedback loop. And I absolutely adore that. So, a little bit of code, maybe, just one class? Yeah? Okay. Where's my IntelliJ? Okay. Here's a class called Lease. And by the way, what helped me is because I was I was not a very good programmer, and still I consider myself, I mean, I work a lot with the framework developer nowadays, so I'm learning. But I will never beat many of you guys, because, you know, starting at 50 is way too late. But this framework gave me a lot of patterns. It gave me the idea of modules to start with. You know, I was going like, oh yeah, I can understand this. I call it, oh, the domain. Okay, what do we have? Assignment, breaks, options, occupancy. What's an occupancy? Huh? Occupancy. Okay, it has to do with a lease. Hey, has to do with a unit. Start date, end date. Looks like a tuple to me. Ah, an occupancy, of course. I mean, there's a unit and there's a lease, and this unit has properties, the lease has properties, but what ties them together? Okay, there's a concept called occupancy. Some tenant has the unit for a while. Ah, I got it. So, very clear patterns, but then, oh yeah, I need to create an occupancy. Ah, repository. Okay, I love that. Find by lease. Ah, okay, okay. Yeah, I can understand their code. I thought it was really cool. And so let's go back to Lease. And change tenancy dates. Okay, change tenancy dates. Okay, action, blah, blah, blah. Let's see in the interface. So let's find a lease. Ah, change tenancy dates, great. So, talking about ubiquitous language, right? It's right there, a tenancy date. What is a tenancy date? You don't know, but the domain experts that work with leases, they do know. So, just to, I hope I made my point. I think frameworks can help with DDD. And actually, this framework introduced me to DDD, which felt for me very naturally because I knew business. I knew business projects, I know how to do management, I know how to do projects. But I also wanted software that moved fluidly with my business like this. And so since we were able to model this core domain for this company and maintain it with 3 people, well, I love that. So then finally, what is the framework? This is it. Open source framework, Apache ISIS. I think it's a pearl in a ugly oyster. And Dan Haywood, the main framework developer, is working on version 2, which will be out soon, and it will be based on, Spring Boot. So that was my talk. Thank you.